Hey guys, how you doing today? Just got back from a friend's place, had a nice dinner. This is the last night of my vacation, so going back to work tomorrow. I'm gonna start shortening these videos a little bit, down to 15 minutes, because I just found out that you can only get 15-minute videos on Instagram, and lots of people have been telling me I should get into Instagram. Try to expand that way. But the channel's doing great, everything's going great, right? So big thanks to the people who have been paying attention, big thanks to the people who've been listening so far. But this video is going to be another sort of introduction, my thoughts on the political sphere, what's going on. Because I think I've decided that I'm going to attempt to run federally in my riding as an independent. And I'm going to use this as a way to document that process and way to document my success and or failure at that. I don't make any bones about it. I think I'm not sitting here being like, and I'm going to get in the power and I'm going to do something. But I think at this stage in the game, I've completely lost faith in our political parties. I'll go through that. And I think that it is now up to citizens to seize control back from corporate capitalists who have infected our political process and intend to destroy us with it. So, I mean, I'll start at, on the right and move to the left so far as it exists. With the Conservatives, right? Why I think the Conservatives are a complete failure. I mean, first of all, they are the party of racists and bigots, what's called social conservatives, right? That's the polite way of saying racists and bigots. Our media doesn't accurately report on anything, so they use doublespeak language in order to describe what's patently obvious in front of your face. So the party of the racists and the bigots, i.e. social conservatives, right? That's conservatism to a T. In this last election, they ran a fellow by the name of Derek Sloan, who is literally a fascist. Like, no bones about it. His policies are fascist. He is actually a fascist. And the Conservative Party platform is essentially a fascist platform, right? They seek the full-scale privatization of all systems, just like Nazi Germany did. They seek the full-scale dismantling of any social service that is for the benefit of the populace, and the insertion of worthless middlemen to reduce service and increase costs for the populace in order to make their small cabal of death cultists extra wealthy. They deny the existence of climate change, or they acknowledge climate change insofar as they need to do so to garner votes. But they have no actual policies and they have no actual ideas. Their ideas are literally just to be contrarians, to counter any meager gains that we've actually made. So they exist on the far right. They're completely unsupportable, and I hope that I live through their complete disintegration and dismantling, without a doubt. That includes provincially. Like, this is without exception, right? Whether it's Kenny in Alberta, and Pallister in Manitoba, here in Ontario under Ford, their objectives are clear-cut and very much the same. For God's sakes, Kenny's party has actually moved forward to attempt to privatize their healthcare system, for God's sakes. Like, they're so far to the right that it's obscene. Anyway, I could spend the whole video talking about them, and I don't want to. You go slightly further to the left, right, and still well entrenched in right-wing politics are the Liberals. The Liberals pretend as though they're a left-wing party. They are not. They are a firmly right-wing party. Their objectives are basically the same as the Conservatives, right? They have worked to privatize systems. They have worked to improve the lives of the capitalist class, but they do so with the understanding that they have to dupe the populace into believing that they're slightly better than the Conservatives. And they convince the populace of this by doing small, tiny, little piecemeal reforms. So the legalization of marijuana was one such reform. The promise of electoral reform, which they immediately bailed on, as liberals do, whenever things actually get tough and they actually have to do real work. they'll happily bail on any idea that garners any popular support. They'll do stuff like raise taxes on the wealthy by 0.1%, but then they'll give the wealthy people who are affected by those taxes enormous breaks in other regards, thereby obliterating any losses. Right? The clearest example of this is when they gifted Galen Weston a bunch of fridges. Right? Instead of just simply mandating and saying to Galen Weston, "Hey, you need new fridges to become more environmentally stable," they bought them for him. They buy pipelines, that kind of thing. And this isn't even touching on their arms dealership that they have with Saudi Arabia and Turkey, right? So they're essentially arms dealers for the American allies in the Middle East, putting them fairly far onto the right wing of things. And in my view, they're more duplicitous than the conservatives, because conservatives actually believe what they say, right? They believe that the society should be dismantled for the benefit of billionaires. They believe that that's a net good, whereas liberals will tell you that they're here to help you, but then they'll betray you immediately for those same billionaires. And the conservatives and the liberals actually work together in this, right? So the liberals will put forward a program, right? That they know the conservatives will attack, right? And so they'll put forward the program to claim that they're left-wingers, to be like, oh, look how good and progressive and all this kind of stuff we are, knowing full well that their conservative allies are just going to dismantle it the second they get power. And so they just yo-yo back and forth on one another. And so the way it works is the liberals move forward one step, and the conservatives move back two. And so the liberals move forward one, the conservatives move back two. So the capitalist class itself is regressing the society the way that they seek to do. But the liberals get to pretend as though they're a progressive group of people instead of just completely allied with the corporate fascists that are the conservatives. And so those are the two major right-wing parties. Now, the NDP, going ever so slightly to the left, the NDP have not proven to me that they're a left-wing party at all, right? Ever since Jack Layton passed away, and even Jack Layton was still sort of a fiscal conservative capitalist, basically. He just wanted to be slightly more liberal so he wanted to move forward two steps so that when the conservatives got into power, they would go back two steps. So instead of us losing gains, that we would just stay in the same place, just wiggling back and forth over and over again, right? Just going boop, 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 boop. And that seems to be where the NDP are at. The NDP are talking an interesting game about how, they want to raise taxes on the wealthy. They're starting to support a basic income, all this kind of stuff. They're starting to actually catch up with progressive politics, at least in terms of rhetoric. But the reality is, I look at those guys and I think, you guys are just reformists. You think that capitalism can be reformed as a system, and it can't. Capitalism cannot be reformed as a system. And this is my primary gripe about the probably the only actual left-wing party in our political system, which is the Green Party. The Greens have consistently been pro-environment. They were the first to swing at basic income. They were the first to, and they speak about this, but the way they talk, it is very clear that they believe that capitalism just needs to be reformed, and capitalism cannot be reformed. And this, to me, is the major failing of all of our political parties, and why I can't support them any longer, and why I won't, and why I don't think anybody should support them, and and this will be my pitch for why I think people should support independent candidates and people who exist outside the system, who are attempting to build coalitions and organizations outside of the traditional political parties, because we cannot vote for people who think that capitalism just simply needs to be reformed, or who are pro-capitalist. Certainly not. Capitalism has in my lifetime collapsed 3 times. Every single time it's collapsed, it's resulted in a consolidation of power under a smaller and smaller cabal of billionaires who have used their political power in order to buy our politicians. It's very clear that that is what's happening. It's very obvious. To the point now where every so often I do encounter someone who denies it, and I'm just like, so there are, you might as well be a flat earther or a Holocaust denier at this point. It's incredibly clear that our political process has been purchased by a cabal of billionaires who are in it to protect themselves and do not care about workers. They are fine if workers die. The COVID-19 proved that, as far as I'm concerned. The fact that we're still sending workers, kids to school, at the height of the pandemic, the line keeps going up. More and more people continue to be infected. What are we doing? Sending kids to school, sending people to work. Because the first wave, that scared the rich, because they were like, we could get infected, right? And some of the rich did get infected, and so it really spooked them. And so they did lockdowns and did all kinds of stuff to protect themselves. We just happened to get caught in that wheelhouse. But then they realized, okay, we can protect ourselves, we can shelter ourselves, everything's totally fine. So let's just send the workers back to work, and if they die, who cares, right? That's the position in my view, that's the position of the Liberals, that's the position of the Conservative Party, certainly. The capitalist system is designed to fail. It's designed to collapse. It's designed to ensure that power remains in the hands of a small group of sociopaths, people who literally don't care about us as individuals, as people, and certainly do not care about our ecosystem or our environment. That's where it gets extremely dangerous, right? That's why these organizations, like the Conservatives, and to a slightly lesser degree the Liberals, I think are probably the most dangerous political organizations that the planet has ever seen. And I include in that Nazi Germany, right? Because at least the Nazis weren't attempting to destroy all human life the way that the Conservatives certainly are, and that the Liberals pretend like they're not, but they're not doing anything to actually fight back against it. Like, we need, without a doubt, we need a full-scale war economy to fight what's coming. There's no other way to say it. We need a full-scale war economy, and to speak with any other language at this point, I think is just delusional madness. We need to grab the fossil fuel lever and go. 10 years ago, we could have done it over 15 years. Now we need to do it over 5. And it really is that clear cut. It really is that simple, and none of our political parties are talking about that. Are talking about moving into a war economy to fight climate change, which the Conservatives have completely been ignoring, and the Liberals do things like, oh, we'll ban plastic straws, but buy a pipeline to keep the oil flowing. Like, it's this obscene, grotesque parlor trick that they're playing on us while pretending as though they can actually help us. And the grotesque nature of capitalism now has gotten so that, like, capitalism literally cannot survive without government subsidy at this stage in the game, right? If the government was simply to say to these capitalists, hey, act like capitalists, get rid of these subsidies, well, the capitalists would collapse. The whole thing would come crashing down. And so we've literally organized our political structure in order to hand taxes reaped from the middle-class citizens and just shoveled them into the mouths of this rapacious, greedy oligarchy, essentially, who can never be satisfied and never will be satisfied. And it needs to stop. It needs to end. Like, we need to restructure our system so these capitalists have zero influence on our society any longer. That's how bad it is, in my view. Like, these capitalists do no work, they provide no value, and all they do is take money from hardworking people and throw it into offshore accounts where they sit on it to help no one and do nothing with, which is this grotesque. This is why our media is completely unable to respond rationally, because they're saying things like, well, how are you going to pay for that when you talk about rational policies that help people, while completely ignoring like $600 billion that are just sitting in corporate offshore accounts doing nothing and helping no one. We can afford that kind of greed and rapacious ridiculousness, but we can't afford to feed and shelter people through something like a basic income. It's disgusting. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm going to document it. We're going to see what happens. Okay, 15 minutes is not a lot of time. That's my pitch. That's who I am. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things, hit all the buttons, hit all the whistles, spread it around. Okay, guys, I love you all. Say hi to your neighbors for me.